Story 1. The Arrival of the Stranger. Saeed was sitting in the small lawn of his old house. The darkness of the night was hidden away, only the moonlight casting shadows on the mansion's walls. The mansion was old, and Saeed had inherited it from his grandfather. He lived alone, with no neighbors around. That night, as Saeed sat with a cup of tea, there was a knock on his door. Startled, he looked up, but there was no one outside. The old chest. The next morning, while cleaning his house, Saeed came across an old chest. It was covered in thick dust, but when he opened it, he found an old photograph inside. The photo showed a man and a woman, appearing to be a married couple. Saeed thought that perhaps this photo belonged to his ancestors. However, as soon as he touched the photo, a cold shiver ran down his spine. The mystery of the photo. That night, Saeed lay on his bed, staring at the photo once more. In the picture, the woman's eyes seemed to hold a strange pain. Saeed tried to learn more about the photo, but no old memories came to his mind. Throughout the night, the photo brought disturbing dreams to his mind, where a woman seemed to call him to her. The terrifying knock. The following night, there was another knock on the door. Saeed opened it, but this time he was struck with fear. Standing outside was the same woman from the photograph. Her face was as white as ice, and her eyes were filled with terror. Saeed quickly shut the door and huddled on his bed. But that night, sleep eluded him as the sound of the knock echoed in his mind. Who was she? Saeed asked his neighbor about the photo and the woman. After a moment of silence, his neighbor revealed that the photo belonged to his grandparents. His grandmother had lived her life in that very mansion, and her spirit was said to haunt the place since her death. It was believed that her ghost still roamed the house. Leaving the house, Saeed's friend advised him to leave the house. However, Saeed dismissed the idea, thinking it was just a figment of his imagination. But that night, as Saeed sipped his tea, he left the door open, and a cold breeze swept through the mansion. He noticed that the photo was no longer on the bed. It had fallen. Reality or fear? The next morning, Saeed searched every corner of his house for the photo, but it was nowhere to be found. He looked through the old parts of the house but found nothing. All that remained in his mind was the woman's face and her terrifying eyes. He wondered if his mind was playing tricks on him. The final knock. That night, there was another knock. This time, Saeed chose not to open the door. He decided to hide under his bed. The knocking continued relentlessly until Saeed held his breath. Suddenly, everything went silent. Gathering his courage, he opened the door, but no one was there. As he opened the door, an old, terrifying voice echoed in his ears. "You may have forgotten me, but I will not forget you." The tale of death. From that night on, Saeed heard the same voice every night. His face grew pale with fear. One day, his friend visited him only to find Saeed unconscious on his bed. Although Saeed's breathing was faint, his eyes were filled with a strange fear. He told his friend, "She will take me. She won't leave me." The terrifying end. On his final night, Saeed called his friend and asked him to burn the photograph. When his friend came to retrieve the photo, he found it back on the bed, even though it had been hidden beneath. He attempted to burn it, but the photo wouldn't catch fire. Suddenly, horrifying screams erupted from the photograph. After that day, no one ever saw Saeed again. It is said that the woman's ghost still roams the house, and anyone who enters never returns. Story 2. The Old House. Emily and her friends decided to explore the abandoned house on the outskirts of town. The locals whispered about the house being cursed, but curiosity got the better of them. The wooden door creaked as they pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit hallway covered in dust. As they stepped inside, an eerie silence enveloped them. Emily felt a chill down her spine, but she shrugged it off as nerves. Little did they know, they had just stepped into a nightmare. The first night, the group decided to spend the night in the house, thinking it would be a fun adventure. As the night deepened, strange noises echoed through the walls. Emily heard whispers, barely audible, as if coming from the shadows. She dismissed it as her imagination. But when one of her friends, Sarah, suddenly screamed, they all rushed to her room. Sarah claimed she saw a figure standing at the foot of her bed, but when they checked, There was nothing there. The vanishing. The next morning, they realized one of their friends, Jake, was missing. His bed was untouched, and his belongings were still in the room. Panic set in as they searched the house, calling his name, but there was no response. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if mocking them. Emily started to feel a sense of dread, realizing they were not alone. The house seemed to be alive, watching their every move. The basement desperate to find Jake, the group decided to explore the basement. The stairs creaked under their weight as they descended into the darkness. The air was thick with a musty smell, and the temperature dropped noticeably. Emily's heart raced as they reached the bottom. The basement was filled with old, broken furniture and cobwebs, but in the far corner, they found a door slightly ajar. The whispers were louder here, almost deafening. Trembling, Emily pushed the door open, revealing a room filled with strange symbols and a large, dusty mirrors. The mirror seemed out of place, its surface covered in grime. But as Emily wiped it clean, she gasped. Reflected in the mirror were not just their own images, but shadows of figures standing behind them. The whispers turned into a cacophony of voices, all speaking in a language they couldn't understand. Suddenly, the room grew colder, and the shadows in the mirror began to move. Emily backed away in fear, but the door slammed shut behind them. They were trapped. The shadows embrace. The shadows in the mirror started to seep out, taking form in the room. Emily and her friends huddled together, terrified. The shadows moved slowly, deliberately, as if savoring their fear. One by one, the figures reached out to touch them, and with each touch, a friend would scream and vanish, leaving only a shadowy outline on the floor. Emily felt paralyzed, unable to move or speak. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if the house itself was feeding off their terror. Emily's escape. With only Emily and Sarah left, they knew they had to escape. The door to the basement was still shut, but Emily noticed a small window near the ceiling. She helped Sarah climb up, and with great effort, they managed to pry it open. Sarah climbed out first, and as Emily prepared to follow, she felt a cold hand grip her ankle. She looked back to see a shadow pulling her back into the darkness. With all her strength, Emily kicked free and scrambled through the window, falling onto the grass outside. The curse. Emily and Sarah ran as fast as they could, not daring to look back. They made it to the edge of the property and collapsed, gasping for breath. But even as they caught their breath, they noticed something strange. The whispers hadn't stopped. They were quieter now, but still there, echoing in their minds. Emily realized with horror that they hadn't truly escaped. The house had marked them, and its curse would follow them wherever they went. The final nightmare days passed, but the whispers persisted. Sarah was the first to succumb, unable to bear the constant torment. Emily found her one morning, lifeless, with a shadowy outline on the floor beside her bed. Emily knew she was next. The whispers were driving her mad, filling her dreams with nightmarish visions of the house and the shadows. She tried to resist, but the house's hold on her was too strong. She knew it was only a matter of time before it claimed her too. The return. In a desperate attempt to end the curse, Emily returned to the house alone. She knew it was a risk, but she had no choice. The whispers guided her back to the basement, to the mirror. She stood before it, staring at her reflection, now accompanied by countless shadows. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The shadows didn't answer, but she knew. They wanted her. Emily closed her eyes, accepting her fate. When she opened them again, she was no longer alone. The house had claimed its final victim. Story 3. The New Beginning. Ava's relocation to the small, quiet town was meant to be a fresh start. The old house she inherited from a distant relative was dilapidated but full of potential. As she unpacked, the locals whispered warnings about the house's dark history, but Ava dismissed them as superstition. The first night, however, an unsettling feeling crept over her. Shadows seemed to move in the corners of her vision, and the house felt colder than it should have been. The strange diary. The second night, as Ava explored the attic, she stumbled upon an old, dusty journal hidden in a corner. The pages were brittle and yellowed, detailing the life of a woman named Eliza who had lived there decades ago. Eliza's entries grew increasingly frantic, describing a malevolent presence she named Muji. Ava was intrigued but skeptical, chalking it up to Eliza's overactive imagination. Haunting begins. As days passed, Ava experienced strange phenomena. Doors creaked open on their own, and she frequently heard whispers in the dead of night. One morning, she found the journal open on the floor, with a new entry written in a shaky hand. It warned of Muji's wrath, describing chilling encounters with the spirit. Ava's skepticism began to wane as the disturbances grew more frequent and aggressive. The legend unveiled. Determined to uncover the truth, Ava visited the local historian, Mr. Caldwell. He recounted the legend of Muji, a vengeful spirit who had once been a resident of the house. According to the lore, Muji was wronged by someone close to her and had been driven mad with rage. The historian explained that Muji sought revenge on anyone who occupied the house, leading to numerous disappearances and deaths. Rising terrors. That night, Ava encountered Muji's fury firsthand. She awoke to find her room covered in strange symbols and felt an icy presence in her bed. The whispers from before turned into growls, and she saw a dark figure hovering at the edge of her vision. Exhausted and frightened, Ava realized that Muji was not just a figment of her imagination, but a real and dangerous entity. The ritual. In a bid to end the torment, Ava decided to perform a ritual described in the journal. The ritual required specific items and incantations meant to appease the spirit. As she set up the ritual space, the house seemed to react violently. The temperature dropped sharply, and the walls seemed to pulse with anger. Despite her fear, Ava continued, hoping the ritual would bring peace. The exorcist's arrival. Desperate for help, Ava contacted a renowned paranormal investigator, Dr. Reynolds. He arrived with his team, bringing specialized equipment to detect and communicate with spirits. Dr. Reynolds confirmed the presence of Muji and prepared for an exorcism. He warned Ava that Muji's power was immense and that the exorcism would be perilous. Ava, though terrified, felt she had no other choice. The exorcism. The exorcism began with intense rituals and chants. The house roared with supernatural energy, and the walls were covered in shifting shadows. Muji's rage was palpable, and the temperature plunged even further. The team struggled to contain the spirit's fury, and Ava felt the oppressive force trying to break her will. The process was grueling, testing everyone's strength and resolve. The climax. During the climax of the exorcism, Muji's presence became overwhelmingly violent. Objects flew through the air, and the house shook as if it were alive. Ava and Dr. Reynolds fought to maintain control, their voices nearly lost in the cacophony of supernatural noise. For a moment, Ava feared the exorcism might fail, leaving them at Muji's mercy. The aftermath. As dawn approached, the house fell eerily silent. The exorcism had succeeded, but the toll it took was evident. Ava felt an uneasy calm as she packed her belongings, her experience leaving her deeply shaken. She decided to leave the house and never return. The legend of Muji, a haunting reminder of the darkness she had faced. The house remained, its story a chilling testament to the malevolent spirit that once resided within. Story 4. Echoes of the Abandoned Asylum. The arrival. Alex pulled up to the abandoned asylum, its looming presence casting long shadows under the setting sun. Rumors about the place had circulated for years: mysterious disappearances, eerie noises, and sightings of ghostly figures. Determined to uncover the truth, Alex pushed open the rusty gates and walked up the crumbling steps. The asylum's heavy doors creaked as they swung open, revealing a dark, dust-filled lobby. Alex's flashlight flickered as they stepped inside, the air thick with decay. Exploring the hallways. The asylum's corridors stretched endlessly, lined with peeling wallpaper and broken furniture. Alex passed by old patient rooms, each one a chilling reminder of the past. Old medical records lay scattered on the floor, some pages torn and yellowed. As Alex explored, a cold draft whispered through the hallways, making the shadows dance and creating an unsettling atmosphere. Strange sounds. The silence was shattered by a series of unsettling noises. Soft whispers, distant footsteps, and a chilling scream that echoed through the halls. Alex stopped in their tracks, trying to pinpoint the source. The sounds seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once, heightening the sense of dread. To the first encounter, in the dim light, Alex saw a shadowy figure at the end of the hallway. The figure seemed to be watching, its presence cold and menacing. When Alex approached, the figure vanished into thin air. Heart racing, Alex looked around, but found nothing but empty hallways and darkness. The diary. While searching through an old office, Alex discovered a dusty diary. The pages were filled with disturbing entries from a former patient. The writing spoke of brutal treatments and strange experiments conducted by the asylum's staff. The final entry described a terrifying encounter with a malevolent entity that seemed to control the asylum. The haunting vision. As Alex read the diary, the air grew colder and the room around them began to blur. Alex was suddenly engulfed in a vision, an unsettling scene of patients being tortured, their cries filling the air. The vision was so vivid it felt real, leaving Alex shaken as they were pulled back to the present. The descent. Determined to find more answers, Alex descended into the basement. The stairs creaked ominously and the air grew colder. The basement was a labyrinth of dark, narrow tunnels. Alex's flashlight revealed grotesque symbols etched into the walls and old, rusted equipment that hinted at sinister experiments. The confrontation. Deep in the basement, Alex encountered the malevolent entity described in the diary. It materialized as a nightmarish figure with hollow eyes and a distorted face. The entity seemed to feed off Alex's fear, its presence growing more oppressive. It let out a bone-chilling scream, its voice a chorus of the asylum's tormented souls. The escape panicked. Alex tried to escape, but the asylum's layout seemed to shift, trapping them in a nightmarish maze. The walls closed in, and the corridors twisted, leading Alex in circles. The entity's laughter echoed through the maze, adding to the terror. With a final burst of adrenaline, Alex spotted an exit and sprinted toward it. The aftermath. Alex emerged from the asylum, breathless and traumatized. The night air felt like a cruel contrast to the asylum's oppressive darkness. As they looked back at the asylum, they saw the figure once more, watching from the shadows. The asylum's grip on Alex was unshakable, and as they drove away, they couldn't escape the feeling that the asylum's echoes would haunt them forever.